I want you to close your eyes for a second, just for a moment. Imagine you're standing on a subway platform.
Okay.
It doesn't matter where. New York, London, Chicago, Tokyo. The air is kind of thick, maybe a little too warm.
Mm-hmm.
You can smell that specific mix of like ozone and steel dust. It's crowded. And you're inching toward the edge, looking down into that dark trough where the tracks are.
I'm with you.
You see the two shiny steel rails where the wheels go? Those are fine.
Mm.
But then there's that other rail, running parallel, usually off to the side. The third rail.
The one that's usually got a cover over it or a big yellow and black warning sign plastered all over it.
Exactly. And even if you aren't an electrical engineer, even if you've never worked a day in transit, you know instinctively what that rail represents.
Oh, yeah. It's immediate high voltage consequence.
Right. You know you do not touch it. You don't step on it. You don't even, point at it too aggressively because it represents a boundary that if you cross it, everything changes in a split second.
It's a primal understanding of danger.
Yeah.
It's not about a law or a rule. It's about physics. Touch equals burn. Simple as that.
Simple as that. And the reason I'm asking you to visualize that high voltage rail is because today we are talking about a societal third rail. We're doing a deep dive into a conversation that suggests that really talking about police conduct, about public trust, and the day-to-day reality of law enforcement in our cities has become the ultimate third rail.
So it's the topic that everyone knows is there. It's humming with bulge.
Yes. But most of us, especially the normal folks just trying to live our lives, we instinctively avoid touching it.
And that avoidance, I think that's what we really need to dig into here. Because usually when people avoid a topic, we assume it's out of politeness.
Right. You don't talk religion or politics at a dinner party.
Exactly. You don't want to be rude. But this deep dive, it suggests something much, much darker. It suggests we aren't avoiding this topic out of politeness. We're avoiding it out of fear, a specific, almost survival-based fear.
That is a heavy premise to start with, a really heavy premise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people might immediately push back and say, what do you mean? People talk about the police all the time.
Of course. Turn on the news, it's there. Open Twitter, it's there.
Yeah. But are they really talking about the reality, or are they performing for an audience?
That's the key distinction, isn't it? We see a lot of noise, but very little signal. And to find that signal today, we aren't looking at a polished government report. We are not looking at a press release from a police chief or a mayor's office.
No.
We are looking at something much, much rawer. We've got a transcript of a candid, completely unguarded dialogue between two observers. Let's just call them Robert and Claude for our purposes.
And I want to set the scene for this source material because it's so important. This isn't a panel discussion on CNN. This feels like a kitchen table conversation.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Picture two people, maybe it's late at night, the house is quiet, maybe they're a little tired. They aren't trying to score points. They're not trying to win an argument. They're just trying to make sense of what they actually see in their city.
Exactly. It's raw. It's unguarded. Robert and Claude are analyzing the state of policing, but they're doing it through the lens of their own intuition, their own observations. They're looking at this massive gap between what the statistics say,
which is that everything is fine.
Right, that everything is mostly fine, and what their gut is telling them, which is that something is fundamentally broken.
So here's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to try to understand why the traditional metrics, specifically those confidence polls that politicians absolutely love to quote, might be hiding a much darker reality.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to look at why the fentanyl crisis, of all things, serves as this perfect, almost bizarre case study for a total breakdown in communication.
And then, the hopeful part. We're going to look at how we might use technology to finally stop asking what the source calls softball questions, and maybe, just maybe, start getting to the truth.
Yeah.
This whole deep dive is about the gap between data and experience. It's about how you can have a spreadsheet that says 74% confidence, while the actual people on the street feel like they are living in, I don't know, a demilitarized zone.
Wow.
It's about why the numbers lie, and maybe more importantly, what the silence of the majority is actually screaming at us.
Okay. Let's touch the third rail. Let's get into section 1, the disconnect.
Let's do it.
I want to start with a specific theory that comes up right at the beginning of this conversation between Robert and Claude. They're talking about the relationship between the public and the police. And, usually when you hear officials talk about this, they use all the good words: partnership, community, working together.
Oh, the buzzwords, the thin blue line, protecting the community, that sort of thing.
Right. But Robert, in this candid moment, He describes it so differently. He says it doesn't feel like a partnership at all. He describes it as two separate worlds trying to avoid colliding with each other.
Collision avoidance. Wow. That is such a specific and telling phrase.
It really stuck with me because when I think about it, collision avoidance is what I do when I'm driving on the highway next to, like, a truck that's swerving a little bit.
Or a drunk driver, yeah.
Drunk driver. I'm not working with them. I'm certainly not communicating with them. I am hyper-focused on their erratic movements so that I can stay out of their way and just survive the drive.
That's a perfect analogy, and if we take that and apply it to policing, it implies a fundamental failure of the entire concept of community policing. I mean, the whole goal of community policing is integration, right?
Yeah.
The officer's supposed to be a part of the neighborhood fabric.
Of course.
But what Robert is describing is segregation. You have the civilian world and you have the police world. And the primary goal of the civilian isn't to cooperate, isn't to call for help. It's to make damn sure those two worlds don't crash into each other.
It creates this weird tension. It's a low-level, constant hum of anxiety in the background of your life. Because if your goal is avoidance, then every single interaction is technically a failure of your strategy.
That's a great point. If a cop speaks to you or you have to speak to them for any reason,
The collision has happened.
the collision has happened. And that completely changes the nature of the interaction. It's no longer about service or help. It's about damage control. How do I get out of this collision with the least amount of damage possible?
And the source material brings up this really fascinating and frankly unexpected example to illustrate this disconnect. They talk about the fentanyl crisis. Now, this really caught my eye because, usually when we talk about police and public trust, we talk about things like excessive force or riots or, high-profile arrests. Why does Robert bring up fentanyl?
I think it's because it represents a massive anomaly in behavior. I mean, think about it. Fentanyl is an undeniable public health emergency.
It's killing people in record numbers.
Horrifying numbers. It's visible on the streets of so many cities. So logically, in a functional society, when there is a massive visible threat to life, you expect the protectors to mobilize. And to mobilize visibly.
Right. If there was a serial killer loose or, God forbid, a sniper on a roof, you'd see press conferences every day. You'd see the police chief on TV saying, "We are hunting this person down. Here's what we are doing. Here's how you can stay safe."
Exactly. Communication increases during a crisis. It's meant to reassure the public that things are under control. But Robert notes the exact opposite is happening with the drug crisis. He points out silence, a lack of visible action. He says something like, if it's this massive public health emergency, you'd expect to see police departments mobilizing differently. But instead, from the perspective of the average citizen, it's just crickets. It's quiet.
And that silence is what feeds this two worlds theory.
Yeah.
It's like the police are operating in a totally different reality.
Mm-hmm.
The community is over here dealing with this plague, seeing the ambulances, seeing the tragedy in their neighborhoods, and the entity that is supposed to be the shield is where? What are they doing?
It creates a void of leadership.
Yeah.
And into that void flows suspicion. It has to. If they aren't helping with the thing that is visibly hurting us right now, then what are they doing?
It reinforces the idea that they have their own agenda, their own priorities, and those priorities are completely separate from the community's actual well-being.
Yeah.
The source uses a metaphor here that is, it's honestly pretty wild. Robert describes the police force as having evolved into its own alien planet.
Alien planet. It's such a sci-fi way to put it, but boy, does it land.
It does. But let's really unpack the psychology of that for a second. If I, as a citizen, view the police department not as Officer Smith from down the block who coaches Little League, but as an alien planet, what does that do to my brain?
Well, it dehumanizes the institution. And I don't mean that as like a pejorative insult to individual police officers, but it describes how the public is forced to perceive them. If they are aliens, they operate by different physics.
Different rules.
They have different motivations that are totally opaque to us. They speak a language we don't understand. Their culture is foreign.
And you can't really negotiate with aliens, can you? You can't reason with them.
No, you can't have a nuanced back and forth human conversation with an entity that feels like a different species. You don't try to reason with an alien invasion, you hide from it, or you just pray it passes you by.
It completely removes the possibility of empathy on both sides. How can a citizen empathize with an alien? And how can an alien empathize with us?
It feels like we've moved past the simple us versus them dynamic to us versus something entirely other.
Which makes that collision avoidance strategy we talked about the only logical choice left. You don't engage with the alien planet unless you absolutely positively have to.
Right.
So we have this vivid picture of the reality on the ground, at least the reality as Robert and Claude see it. We've got the two worlds, the weird silence on fentanyl, the feeling of living next to an alien planet. But, and this is the big but, here is where it gets so confusing. If you look at the official data, none of this exists.
Right. If you just look at the spreadsheets, everything's great.
And this brings us right to section 2, the data illusion.
Yeah.
Because Robert and Claude, they don't just trade feelings and metaphors. They actually look up the numbers during their conversation. They want to see if their feelings match the so-called facts.
And what they find is a massive, glaring contradiction. Claude pulls up a 2025 Gallup survey.
A recent one. And what does that survey say?
It says that 74% of Americans report confidence in their local police. 74%. And that number is actually up from 71% the prior year.
74%. I mean, let's be real for a second. In this political climate, getting 74% of Americans to agree on anything is a miracle.
It's unheard of.
If a president had a 74% approval rating, they'd be carving his face on Mount Rushmore tomorrow. It's a staggering number.
It is an overwhelmingly positive number. It's a solid B+, maybe even an A- in the world of public opinion.
So how do we square this circle? How? On one hand, we have the third rail, the fear, the collision avoidance, the alien planet. And on the other hand, we have a landslide majority of people saying, yeah, we have confidence. Is Robert just wrong? Is he just a cynic living in a bubble?
And this is where the source material gets really, really sharp. Because Robert doesn't just reject the number outright. He deconstructs the word. He challenges what the metric of confidence actually means in this context.
He calls it the low bar theory.
The low bar theory. It's brilliant. Robert argues that when a pollster calls you out of the blue and asks, do you have confidence in your local police? Why the average person isn't performing some complex, nuanced analysis of community relations.
No.
They aren't thinking about the silence on the fentanyl crisis or the lack of real dialogue?
No. He suggests they are thinking something much more basic, primal even. He says, and I'm paraphrasing here, you could say, yeah, well, the murder rates haven't gotten, like, crazy or anything, so yeah, I guess I have confidence in them.
Think about the implication of that for a second. He's suggesting that confidence in this poll is just a measure of, my neighborhood is not currently on fire.
Right. It's like asking if I have confidence in the electric company. I mean, the lights are on right now. I haven't been electrocuted today, so yes.
Yeah.
I guess.
But do you trust them? Do you think they care about you as a customer? Do you feel like you have a relationship with them? That's a totally different and much harder question.
Much harder question. So this poll, it measures the absence of chaos, not the presence of trust.
That's it, exactly. It's a soft metric. It means the status quo is holding. It means the two-world strategy of collision avoidance is working well enough that people aren't, storming the barricades. But it does not mean the relationship is healthy.
Robert goes even further than that. He gets pretty blunt. He calls these statistics garbage.
He does. He calls them softballs.
Softballs we've been lobbying for the past 30 years. I found that specific phrasing, lobbying for, really interesting. It implies that the system wants these easy questions. It's not an accident.
Well, of course it does. If you were a police chief or a mayor, what do you want? You want a metric that says 74%. You don't want a metric that digs into the messy, uncomfortable, qualitative reality of the alien planet.
So you ask questions that are designed to elicit a yes.
You ask binary questions. Do you have confidence? Yes or no. There's no room for, well, it's complicated.
And that leads to what the source calls the baseline neutral. This was another concept that really clicked for me.
Right. Most people, the vast majority of that 74%, they are not activists. They aren't criminals. They likely have very, very little direct interaction with the police at all in a given year.
They're just living their lives.
Exactly. So when they're asked this question, they just default to neutral. They're there, they're doing their job, I guess, whatever. And in a binary poll, whatever gets tallied in the confidence column.
It's the path of least resistance. Saying no confidence feels like you're making a big political statement. It feels like you are joining a protest or picking a side.
Whereas saying yes just feels like being a normal neighbor. It's the don't rock the boat answer.
Precisely. So the data is fundamentally skewed toward positivity because the methodology itself refuses to measure the nuance. It's designed to count checked boxes, but it completely misses the texture of the relationship. It misses the alien planet vibe entirely.
Which means the people in charge are flying blind.
So we have a situation where the leaders are looking at a dashboard that's flashing green light, system healthy, while people on the ground are feeling something very, very different. But this is the big question. Why don't they say something? If it's so bad, if there's this much disconnect, why doesn't that 74% number drop? Why is everyone so quiet?
And now we are getting to the absolute heart of it. This is section 3, the fear factor.
Yeah.
And this is where the conversation turns from being about data and methodology to being about pure survival.
We talked about the third rail at the very beginning, the thing you don't touch.
Yeah.
Now we're about to find out why you don't touch it. The source explores this idea that the only people who really truly talk openly about police conduct are those with direct experience.
And usually bad experience.
Right. The activists, the victims of misconduct, their families, the outliers.
The outliers, exactly.
But the middle ground, the suburbs, the average working class family, they are silent. And Robert suggests that this silence isn't because they are happy or content. It's because they are actively doing a calculation in their heads.
The retaliation calculation.
And Robert uses a comparison here that, I have to admit, it shocked me a little when I first read it. He explicitly compares the feeling of talking about the police to the feeling of talking about a cartel.
It is a shocking comparison. And we should be very clear here. He isn't saying the police are a cartel in terms of criminality or, drug running.
No, not
It is comparing the power dynamic and the specific fear involved in speaking out against them.
He says something like, maybe talking about the cartel would be like bad, but talking about the police, it's bad. You just don't want to do it. And then he says there's a visceral fear that they can F with you because you live in their city.
Let's just pause and really look at that phrase. Because you live in their city.
Yeah.
It implies a feudal relationship, like a lord and his serfs. The city doesn't belong to you, the citizen. It belongs to them. They hold the keys. They control the roads. They have the state-sanctioned power to detain you, to arrest you, to completely disrupt your life over a minor infraction.
It's the ultimate power imbalance. If I complain about the cashier at the grocery store, that cashier can't come to my house and arrest me. But the police, they have authority over your physical liberty. And that creates a massive, massive chilling effect. The source uses a military term to describe this risk. Signature. Signature. I caught that too. I don't want that signature. It's such a specific phrase.
In military or intelligence terms, a signature is what makes you visible on the enemy's radar. If you have a heat signature or an electronic signature, you can be targeted.
They're no longer part of the background noise.
Exactly. Robert is saying that speaking up, filing a complaint, making a fuss at a town hall, being the squeaky wheel, it gives you a signature. It lights you up on their dashboard.
And once you're lit up, you're vulnerable. You start worrying about being pulled over for a broken taillight you don't actually have. You worry about them driving slow past your house. You worry about what happens if you ever actually need them for a real emergency. Will they show up? Or will they take their time?
Exactly. It's the fear of being marked. And so the rational, self-preserving, survivalist move is to remain invisible, to stay off the radar, to be a ghost in your own city.
This creates such a profound catch-22.
Yeah.
It's a paradox. We always hear police chiefs and city officials say, we need the community to talk to us. We need your feedback to get better.
We can't do our jobs without you.
Right. But the very nature of their power dynamic, the thing that allows them to do their job, is the exact same thing that scares people into total silence.
It's self-censorship on a mass scale. Robert talks about just avoiding raining on somebody's day, which on the surface sounds polite, like, oh, I don't want to be a bother.
But underneath that politeness is the fear of the third rail.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the nail that sticks out because you might get hammered down.
And here's the really dangerous part of this silence, the really insidious part. Because people don't talk openly, because there is no transparent, healthy back and forth. What fills that vacuum?
Rumors.
Rumors, whispers. Robert calls them nuggets and tidbits.
Nuggets and tidbits. Things you hear from a neighbor whose cousin is a cop. Things you see on a grainy cell phone video that disappears after a day. And Robert makes a really dark but logical point here. He says, if they're doing that kind of awful, horrible salves that I've heard them doing, then that really means that. Like, they're probably a lot of things worse than that.
That is the logic of the iceberg. It's
Yeah.
chilling. If the entire system is this opaque, and if people are this afraid to speak, then the stories that do manage to leak out must just be the very tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
The public has no choice but to assume that for every one story they hear, there are 10 worse ones that were successfully silenced by fear or intimidation.
It breeds this deep, cancerous suspicion. It means that even if a police department is, say, 95% good officers doing a good job, that alien planet vibe and the
Yeah.
total lack of transparency means the public will always assume the worst about the other 5%.
And that completely destroys legitimacy. You can have compliance, people obeying the law because they fear the consequences, but you don't have legitimacy. You don't have moral authority. And without moral authority, policing becomes an occupation rather than a public service.
But wait a minute. I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. We're sitting here talking about all this silence and this fear and people not wanting a signature. But I spend a lot of time on the internet, and if I open Twitter or X or TikTok, I don't see silence.
No.
I see millions of people screaming about the police, both for and against. Every video of an arrest gets analyzed frame by frame. Every incident goes viral within an hour. So is Robert wrong? Is this whole idea of silence just a myth?
That is a great question. And it leads us perfectly into Section 4, the truth gap. Because Robert and Claude address this specifically, they look at social media as a potential gauge for public sentiment.
And what's his verdict? Does Twitter represent the true voice of the people?
Not even close. He calls it performative.
Performative.
He says Twitter is not a real beat on things, it's theater. And, I mean, think about why people post on social media. They are performing for an audience. They are signaling their tribal affiliation.
Right, you're curating a brand.
Exactly. If you're on the left, you might post a hashtag like defund or abolish. If you're on the right, you might post a back the blue flag. You are reciting a script to get likes and retweets and validation from your in-group.
You aren't having a genuine exploratory conversation. You are broadcasting a pre-approved message.
Precisely. And Robert argues that the kitchen table is the only standard that actually matters. He says the honest conversations, the true feelings, they only happen with the comfort of a home with some buddies.
When the stakes are zero.
When the stakes are zero, when you're not worried about your boss seeing it or your neighbor or a cop.
That brings us right back to that gatekeeping idea. If the truth only comes out when the microphones are off and the phones are put away, how can we ever possibly measure it? How can we ever know what people really think?
That is the measurement problem in a nutshell. If a government surveyor calls your phone, you put on a mask and give the public answer, yes, I have confidence.
If you post on Twitter, you put on a different mask and give the performative answer. All cops are heroes, or all cops are bastards.
But the real answer, the one that's full of nuance and anxiety, the one about the fear and the alien planet and the quiet collision avoidance that stays at the kitchen table, it never sees the light of day.
It's like we have two different realities running in parallel. The public reality, which is loud and extremely polarized, and the private reality, which is quiet and full of a kind of shared, unspoken anxiety.
And the policymakers, the people in charge, they are only listening to the public reality. They see the 74% poll, and they see the Twitter fights, and they think that's the whole picture. They're completely, totally missing the kitchen table truth.
So, okay, we've painted a pretty bleak picture here. I mean, let's be honest. We have a system that feels like an alien planet. We have official data that is, according to the source, basically garbage. We have a public that is too scared to speak up because they don't want a signature. Is there any way out of this? Or are we just stuck with the third rail forever?
Well, this is where the conversation takes a turn. The source material actually offers a vision for the future, and it's surprisingly optimistic in a very pragmatic kind of way.
This is Section 5. Reimagining the future. And I love the specific comparison that Robert uses here. He says we need to fundamentally change the entire categorization of what police are in our society.
He talks about the paying medicines ideal.
Paying medicines. Now, I had to think about that for a second. I assume he means something like paramedics or EMTs.
Yes, or, as he also puts it, delivery drivers.
Okay, let's think about that. How do I treat a delivery driver?
It's a simple transaction. You ordered something, they bring it to your door, it's a useful service, you say thanks, they leave. The end.
Okay, how do I treat a paramedic?
You are in a crisis. You are having maybe the worst day of your life. You call them, they arrive to help, they are competent, they de-escalate the medical situation, they fix the problem. You trust them implicitly in that moment.
Do I fear the paramedic?
No, absolutely not. You're relieved to see them.
Do I worry that the Amazon driver is going to look up my record and arrest me because my package is heavy?
No, of course not.
Do I worry that the paramedic is going to retaliate against me later if I say, hey, I think that bandage is a little too tight?
No, you don't. And that is the absolute key. The interaction is unloaded.
Unloaded, that's the perfect word.
It doesn't have the voltage of the third rail. It's not freighted with all this history and fear and power dynamics. It's just a service.
The source says the goal should be removing the terror
Yeah.
and the loaded nature of the interaction. It should just be a normal conversation.
Real back and forth. That's the phrase Robert uses over and over. He wants a world where a cop and a citizen can just talk, like two normal human beings, without the citizen secretly calculating their survival odds every second of the conversation.
But to get there, we have to solve the data problem. We have to stop lying to ourselves with these 74% confidence polls. If we don't know what's really happening at the kitchen table, we can't possibly fix it. And here is where the source gets a little bit futuristic. Robert suggests using coming AI to step up the game.
This is a really interesting twist in their conversation, because usually when we talk about AI and policing, it's incredibly dystopian.
Oh, yeah. We think of RoboCop. We think of facial recognition cameras on every street corner. We think of predictive policing, Minority Report stuff.
It usually reinforces that alien planet vibe, making them even more powerful and opaque.
Exactly. But Robert is suggesting the complete opposite. He wants to use AI as a listener, as a new auditor.
So instead of a multiple choice survey, instead of asking, do you have confidence, yes or no, the source suggests moving to open-ended qualitative interviews and community listening sessions.
Imagine this for a second. Instead of a robocall asking you to press 1 for good, 2 for bad, imagine a system that allows thousands or hundreds of thousands of citizens to tell their stories anonymously.
To just talk.
I was walking home last night and a cruiser slowed down and followed me for 3 blocks and I felt my heart stop. I didn't call the cops when my bike was stolen because I just didn't want the hassle and the paperwork.
Normally, that kind of data is useless to a bureaucracy. You can't put "I felt my heart stop" into an Excel spreadsheet. It's too messy, it's too human, it's too qualitative.
But that's where the AI comes in. Large language models are becoming incredibly good at reading and understanding messy human stories and finding the patterns inside them.
So an AI could listen to 10,000 hours of this kitchen table talk and come back and say, hey, Mayor, your official confidence rating is 74%, but just so you know, 80% of your citizens use the word fear or anxiety when describing a routine traffic stop.
That would be a complete game changer. It would turn those nuggets and tidbits, those anecdotes, into hard, actionable data. It would make the invisible visible.
It would finally give a voice to the silence. It would allow the third rail to be mapped and understood without anyone having to touch it and get burned.
It's about moving from counting beans to actually understanding the flavor of the beans, about listening, really truly listening at scale for the first time.
And that is the ultimate desire that's expressed in the source. To break the standoff. To move from a standoff vibe where everyone is on guard and has their hand on their hip to a system of real back and forth.
Robert acknowledges that this is incredibly hard. Yeah. He knows this isn't an overnight fix. You don't undo decades of alien planet conditioning with a new app. But he says it all starts with one simple thing.
Asking real thing questions.
Pardon the French, but that's the direct quote. Real questions.
Not softballs. Not garbage questions that are designed to get a pat on the back and a nice press release. Real, uncomfortable, probing questions about the true nature of the relationship.
And being willing to hear the answers, even if they hurt, even if they completely destroy that pretty 74% graphic you were planning to use in your re-election campaign.
Because you can't fix a relationship if you're actively pretending it's perfect.
Wow. We have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Let's recap the journey for a moment before we go.
We started on the subway platform, staring at the third rail. That realization that policing has become a topic so charged with fear and danger that the average person just refuses to touch it.
We looked at the two worlds theory, the idea that citizens are just trying to avoid colliding with the police rather than partnering with them. We saw how the bizarre silence on the fentanyl crisis just reinforces this idea that the police are living on their own alien planet.
Then we deconstructed the data illusion. We saw how a 74% confidence rating is really just a low bar measurement of basically, I haven't been murdered today.
We dove deep into the fear factor, the really terrifying comparison to a cartel's power dynamic, the idea of a signature, and the deep-seated need to stay invisible to avoid retaliation.
And finally, we looked at the hope. The idea that if we use technology not for surveillance, but for listening, really listening to the kitchen table truth, we might be able to transform the police from an alien planet into just paying medicines, into help.
It's a compelling vision, it really is. But I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought. It's something that has been kind of sticking with me since I read Robert's final sentiment in the source material.
What's that?
Robert talks about the nuggets and tidbits he hears, the rumors, the horror stories that get whispered from person to person.
Hmm.
And he says that because people are too afraid to speak, because the third rail is so dangerous, these rumors that we hear, they are just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
So here's the question. If the bad stories we hear, the viral videos, the scandals, the whispers, if those are just the things that manage to leak out despite the fear, what does the rest of that iceberg actually look like? What is happening in the silence?
That is a chilling thought. If the visible problems are only the ones that manage to survive the fear filter, then the invisible problems might be the ones that actually define the entire system.
So next time you see a confidence poll, I want you to ask yourself, are people answering because they truly trust the system? Or are they answering because they are just deeply relieved they haven't collided with it yet?
That's the real question.
Thanks for diving in with us.
Stay safe out there.
We'll see you next time.